Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. So tonight, I'm painting up a couple of my rifles. I suppose I might owe a kind of an apology to my brother-in-law. He's the first one that I know of that ever painted a rifle. And it was his normal hunting rifle, a 300 Win Mag if I remember right. And I don't know if he used the same kind of paint that what I'm using or not. I never did ask him about it, but I saw that rifle and I was like, oh my God, dude, why did you do that? That's just the ugliest thing you could ever do to a rifle. And he said that he thought that it made a difference with, you know, when he was out hunting deer or elk or whatever, which, you know, I'm still not sold on that, because typically speaking, you know, deer, antelope, elk, you know, are hunted at, or, you know, on my typical shot on, you know, say a mule deer is, well, they've gotten shorter over the years. I would say my first 10 years of hunting, my average shot on a mule deer was probably around 200 yards. And then I started taking my kids hunting, and kids, when you start taking kids or first-time hunting, or, you know, folks that are going hunting for the first time, you really shouldn't be thinking in yards so much as you should be thinking in feet. So even if that person is you know, a fairly good marks person, you know, I mean, if you can take them out to the range and, you know, you can set them down on a bench and they can ring steel plates out to 500-600 yards fairly consistently, and then you get them off the bench and you put them in, you know, your classic positions, you know, standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, and they can still keep most of their shots on a paper plate out to say 300 or 400 yards, you know, in varying wind and weather conditions and everything. You know, a fair marks person. You take somebody like that and you take them hunting for the first time, and that's a completely different thing. It's just a completely different thing. You know, I mean, now granted, the deer and the antelope aren't shooting back at you, you know, so you've got that in your favor, but you're still, that level of excitement, you know, your heart starts pounding, you know, the animal might be moving, it might be walking, you know, it might be raining. I mean, field conditions are entirely different than out at the range. So when you start taking young people or, you know, new hunters hunting, you ought to be thinking more of feet instead of yards. So typically when I take somebody hunting for the first time, or the first time I've ever taken them or whatnot, I usually like to think about, you know, like 50 yards. Okay, so that's 75 feet, right? A yard is 3 feet. No, that'd be 150 feet, okay? So very, very close. Now, even at that, I'm not too sure that painting a centerfire hunting, or, you know, a big game rifle is, I'm not too sure I would go that far. But pellet rifles, which is what we're talking about tonight, I absolutely have seen a big difference between a painted pellet rifle and a non-painted pellet rifle. You know, and I'm actually painting 2 of them tonight, and I should have shot this video honestly before I started painting them. But I will grab a regular rifle here. This is an old Sheridan 20 caliber, you know, multi-pump rifle. And it's not quite the same as what these Benjamin Marauders are. Not the same rifle, not, you know, the exact same color and everything. These Benjamin Marauders, the synthetic ones, you know, the ones that I've got have come in black. Okay, so, you know, you've got a big, and they're a fairly large rifle too, you know, so you've got this big old honking rifle, and it's all black, and the scope is all black too. That is a big black object. And around where I hunt, So just imagine, this being this color, right? A very dark, contrasty type of color. And one that stands out really hard against everything around here. So where I hunt mostly with a pellet rifle is in kind of built up areas, so I've got a couple of buddies that have got ranches, and I think just about every rancher out there has got problems with pigeons, cottontails, jackrabbits, and gophers. It's just the name of the game, Pigeons, they get into the barns and everything, and they crap all over, feed, all over equipment. They build nests up in things. I don't think I've had anybody talk about them building nests inside of like chimneys or anything like that and plugging that up. But pigeons, they're a cool bird and everything, but when they start causing problems, they just do. They need removed. Gophers make holes all over the place, and cattle step in them, break legs. They're just not a good thing either if if they get too many of them. And that's kind of the same deal with all of this stuff. You have a couple of cottontails, a couple of jackrabbits, okay, fine, great. Well, now if you have 20 of them, now they start eating into your profits, as a rancher. They also, at one buddy's place, he's got quite a few older cars out there, and those cottontails will get up in there and start chewing at wiring harnesses. I'm not sure what would be all tasty about a wiring harness, but they do it. And in places like that, pellet rifles are the name of the game. Even a 22 long rifle, a 22 long rifle's got a range of 1.5 miles. If you elevate the muzzle to, 37 degrees or something like that, and you shoot, that bullet will end up 1.5 miles away from where you're standing. And, it might have enough power to, cause damage to people, livestock, pets, property, whatever. These pellet rifles they don't have that kind of range. They shoot Diablo pellets, which have got a very low ballistic coefficient, and they're very good out to 50, 75, 100 yards, which is really surprising to me. Growing up with an old Daisy 880. But after that distance, boy, that pellet is just running out of steam, and it's slowed down so much that it just doesn't have the range. So pellet rifles, I really love them for close range work around built up areas. And so this new place that we picked up, it's kind of the same deal. We're on 2.5 acres. I don't have any problems with pigeons. I don't have a barn yet, although I guess my wife just found a horse that a friend of hers needs to rehome. So apparently as soon as springtime comes, we got to get a fence up and get a barn or a loafing shed or whatever. I'm not really a horse person, so whatever she says she needs, I guess I'll have to build it. And if it's a barn, then the pigeons will come. That's just the way it is. But I have been noticing that there are a ton of gophers here. There's a ton of gopher holes out in the yard, around the shop here, underneath the driveway. There's a ton of gopher holes, and so those are going to have to get cut down. I don't plan to completely get rid of them. They are kind of fun to watch and everything, but there doesn't need to be near as many holes out here as what there are right now. So I'm getting the rifles ready. My favorites are these Benjamin Marauders, like I said. And I think I've probably showed you all a video on this one here. But you'll notice that it's painted. So, I guess I'm skipping around an awful lot tonight, more so than usual. But I have noticed a big time difference with this rifle being painted versus that one, which is my 25 Marauder. This is my first 22 Marauder with Crossman barrel. That is a 25 Marauder with the Green Mountain barrel. And this is the one that I shoot the most. The 25, for me, it's too much power. And I know that might be, subject to debate, depends on the game species and everything you're shooting, but For me, that 25, it carries too far. It's got too much power, and the shot count is kind of low. You only get 16 shots out of that one per fill versus 40 shots per fill out of this one. This one I can take into barns, and if I'm shooting up like to a tin roof, I got to make sure I got a roof joist or something behind it, but I'll be okay, typically speaking. That 25, it'll blow holes right through the tin roof, tin siding, all that kind of stuff, and that's not what you want inside of a barn. So that 25, for me, about the only time I use it is almost when a 22 long rifle would be suitable to use. Whereas this 22 Marauder is it's a little bit too much power, but that works pretty good when you're shooting around a barn and then you step out and you need to take a 50-yard shot to hit a gopher out there. Also works pretty good on jacks up to about 40 yards, something like that. And jackrabbits can be pretty tough customers. But I have back to the paint thing, especially, well, I guess all of it is small game with a pellet rifle, but especially with pigeons. In my buddy Scott's place, he's got a barn and he's got an awful lot of pigeon problems there. And one day I was out here, this rifle was completely black, black rifle, black stock, action, barrel, scope, I mean the whole 9 yards was black, right? Even had a black sling on it. And I'd been hunting the pigeons there for a couple of years, and I remember there was a couple of pigeons on top of his barn. They were 30 yards away, something like that. And I kind of eased up behind a fence post, and I went to raise the rifle. I probably had the rifle slung like this, right? Okay, so I come up, and I can't remember. I might have come up, this is the way I normally do it, but I don't know if they were looking at me, if I might have actually dismounted it different. But as I brought that big black rifle up, and rested it on the fence post, those pigeons looked right at me. They saw that big black rifle moving, and they flew off. And I thought, so then I thought to myself, okay, well, what were the pigeons seeing? So I kind of imagined that I was up there, on top of the roof. And then I looked back down, or actually there's a window in the top of the barn. And so I went up there, and I was looking down at where I was standing. And there was not one thing that was black or even dark in that whole area where I was standing, with the exception of the fence post. It was a fairly large, like a telephone pole size, like you'd cut off old telephone poles to make fence posts right there. And that's when I got to thinking, I thought, at the distances that you shoot pellet guns, I think that painting them makes a huge difference. So what I did was I went ahead and painted this one up. And it's nothing special. I use this this rust-oleum camouflage 2X ultra cover paint from Walmart. Also bonds to plastic. Non-reflective finish, ultra flat colors. Now what I've been noticing is that it doesn't seem to matter what color you use, except for try to blend it in with your typical terrain, in color. I haven't really noticed all that much about seasons. This one right here, I gave it this one paint job, and it's I don't change it from winter to summer or anything. And in fact, you can see that it's starting to show wear marks, from my hands in different places. There's some pigeon blood or cottontail blood, whatever. Just add some extra breakup. But you can see where I grip it. It rubs the paint off up in here. And that just kind of seems to add some contrast to it. But I like the kind of tan colors. Tans and just a little bit of green. This one's kind of bright. I've got another one that I need to finish this one off. But it really seems to help. It seems like the animals They don't spook near as fast. I don't know if the animals, you know, don't like the color black or what, but so typically I just go with a nice light color, the lightest ones that I can get. I do wish that I could find some of this in white. I think white would be really good for you know, a dedicated winter rifle. But the let's see, let me grab you my favorites. So you got this one. These two here are my favorite base colors. And I don't see on here where they have a color number. You know, I don't see where they have a color number on them. And the colors might not always show up all that great inside the, you know, through the camera and everything. But those are the two base colors that I like the most. And then I typically just hit it a couple of times to kind of break that solid color with, you know, a little bit darker color, and away we go. So this one right here is done. I'm just waiting for it to dry now. This this is another 22 Marauder. The reason I got this one is because this one, my first one, has developed a slow leak. And I've been hand pumping it, and from what a lot of the folks say on the internet forums is that those hand pumps get you an awful lot of moisture inside the rifle. So when I go to strip it down, you know, it might be down for a couple of weeks by the time I order parts and everything. And you can see, I mean, I don't really, I tape everything off. You know, your lenses for your scope, the front and back, the numbers for your power ring, that's very important to tape that off. The numbers on this scope for the you know, your parallax adjustment. And then I put a strip of tape over the where the magazine well is, and then a strip of tape around the trigger, and kind of flare it out so that I don't get very much paint up inside the trigger group. You won't be able to see it, but I tape off the pressure gauge, and then a strip of tape across the muzzle, and then just go to town with it. This stuff, it sticks fairly well, but like you see on this one, I mean, it comes off pretty easy also. I have no doubt that a little bit of denatured alcohol or something would just strip it right off. These right here, not sure if I've shown you all these before or not, but this is just a piece of 3/4 inch pipe insulation, and then punch yourself some holes in there with a leather punch, and then you have individual pellet holders. So in case you forget a magazine, you know, you leave the car and you forget your spare magazine, or you know, this rifle shoots 2 pellets fairly well. The H&N Field Target 14.66 grain round nose, I think, and then these I can't remember what they are, but I think they're an H&N pellet also, but they're like a big honking wad cutter hollow point type of jobber, and they're not quite as accurate, but boy, they thump a pigeon pretty good. So anyway, so that and a camo sling, and they work out pretty good. So this one right here, I guess I can show you the last little bit of painting on it. There's not a whole lot left. This one is, that one is the base coat. So it's looks more brown to me. So I was going to go ahead and hit it with just a very few of these really dark, this darker green color. So like I said, these, you know, this paint job isn't really supposed to look nice. I mean, it's supposed to look kind of raggedy and, you know, kind of break up that solid black color. So if you get runs, you know, who cares if you hit a spot that, you know, it didn't get enough paint on it, and, you know, I mean, it just doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, you're not trying to put a nice paint job on it, like a nice, even, solid paint job. You're there to kind of break everything up. So So don't be scared if you get it wrong. You can't really get it wrong. And if you do, you just paint over it again. So we're going to go here on and just break things up just a little bit. The danger with the darker paint is that you do too much of it and you get back to that solid black dark nastiness that, you know, stands out really hard against everything. I think that looks pretty good. So now we're going to go ahead, and this bottom part should be nice and dry, so we'll flip it over. And I have one bipod that I usually use for this. I don't typically like carrying a rifle with a bipod on it. I feel it gets in the way, but for stuff like this, that one bipod that I have comes in pretty handy, but you know, I just moved, I'm not sure where it is. But anyhow, so this part, you can maybe kind of see how black that top half of it is and how it stands out against everything else more than what the tan color does. You know, I mean, so just imagine the black up against that concrete. The black stands out way more against the concrete than this tan color does. You know, I mean, it just, and I think animals see it way more than what we do. So the big deal is to get rid of all the black. I don't do any like surface prep, you know, like cleaning it with denatured alcohol to make the paint stick better, because honestly I don't care if the paint sticks you know, amazingly well. I mean, I want it to stick, you know, well enough to get, you know, say a year's worth of service out of the paint job, so that I'm not painting it every 2 months, you know, but beyond that, I really don't care how long it lasts, because it's real fast and easy to touch it up. Okay, so now you want to come back here, because this is where your you know, pigeons or whatever is going to see the most. From this end, make sure you got no glares. You will end up with some glare from the scope lenses, but you know, there's not much to do about that. And I also typically don't let the colors dry before I add the second one. So just kind of break that up a bit. And I think that's about good. These spots up in here, well, this part right here is where my drop chart is. So it'll be kind of a glare anyway with you know, the shiny clear tape over the top of it. This part right here will wear off real fast from my cheek, and then this part up in here will wear off fairly fast from my hands. And then I've got to strip the tape off of it and everything, but it'll end up looking pretty good. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about with the whole camo thing. The whole camo thing and air rifles especially. Okay, so remember how I was talking about that color black being very there we go. Not too much. That color black standing out and almost being like a danger color to animals, right? I've kind of noticed the same thing with people. Now granted, I don't hunt people. I'm not in that line of work, but But especially when you're working around built-up areas, you know, like in this case right here, you know, my nearest neighbor is 100 yards that way and 100 yards that way, right? And, you know, I mean, I haven't met but a couple of the neighbors yet, but they'll get to know me, and, I'm sure we'll get along fine. I mean, I'm a pretty easygoing kind of guy. But my buddies' places, you know, they're one of them. Well, they're, you know, larger places a little bit farther outside of town, but they do still have neighbors. And I've run into quite a few of those neighbors while I was out, you know, hunting on their places. And I've noticed that the painted rifles, they don't kind of get the same reaction from folks who might not be gun folks like a black rifle will. Now, so let's say like Scott. Okay, I was out hunting on his place one time, and it was my boy and I, and this was 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. And we were just out hunting gophers. I mean, I suppose if a jack came up, we'd have shot him also. A jackrabbit, not a jack person, or a fox. I have taken 4 fox now with that .22 caliber Marauder. You have to hit them in the right spot, but boy, it'll do it. Clear out to 60 yards, which still amazes me that a pellet rifle is able to do that. But these aren't the pellet rifles that I grew up with, that's for sure. But anyway, so the neighbor lady, we were out hunting. We were kind of getting up close to the fence, and then all of a sudden, this woman from the property next door jumps the fence and comes running up to us. I mean, she wasn't running, but she was walking in a hurry. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. So I told Vance, I said, hey, go ahead and sling your rifle. And, you know, I did the same thing, because you never know if somebody coming up to you, if they're going to be, if they're one of those that really isn't into guns and they don't like killing things and all that kind of stuff. So we slung our rifles, and she came up and she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, my boy and I here are hunting gophers, you know, Scott's a friend of mine. And she says, oh, okay. And then that was the end of it. You know, she didn't even look. I mean, I think she looked at our rifles once being slung, and that was it. It just, she was actually looking for a lost calf. And so we ended up and wanted to know if we had seen it. Well, we hadn't, but we went ahead and I wrote down her phone number. We continued on our hunt, and we ended up seeing it. About 30 minutes later, called her up and then helped her, get it corralled and put back where it was supposed to go. But I've noticed the same thing about the color black on a rifle with people, is that these rifles, once you've put any color other than black on them, or any lighter type color, it's almost like folks don't see them the same way. And they seem to be much more relaxed when you interact with them. Now, I don't know if that happens the same way out like deer or elk hunting. Because typically when you're deer or elk hunting, you know, you're out away from people. You're out in the national forest on a chunk of state land or whatever. And typically the folks that you run into when you're deer hunting are out there hunting deer also. Whereas the air rifles, you know, you're much more likely to run into non-hunters. And it seems to me like that, like just changing the color of your rifle really helps with public relations there. I've also noticed the same thing with a pocket knife, and I've talked about this in other videos. You know, you take those, a typical, a 3-inch folding pocket knife, and you put a real shiny finish on that, or a black finish, one of the two, and black scales on it, and then you combine that with a really fast action, and it tends to turn non-knife people off. Whereas you take that same knife and you put more of a matte finish on it, and you put lighter non-black type colors on there. Like this one's got Damascus bolsters and cowbone or shin bone scales on it, and a Damascus blade. And sure, you can open it up quick, it just pops right out of there. But typically, like at the gas station where you go to punch another hole in the top of your coffee cup, you know, you pull the knife out of your pocket, you open it up far enough to be able to access the tip, punch your hole in your coffee cup lid, put it away. You know, I do, when I go get one of them delicious loaf and jug type cappuccinos, that's the way I do it, and hardly anybody ever even looks twice. And I know, you know, there'll be, you know, folks that watch this video, they're like, you know, heck, that's your right to carry a knife or to carry a gun or whatever, and, you know, who cares what other people think? Well, you know, there is some of that, but there's also some of, you know, get along with your fellow man as well as you can. You know, it just kind of helps things go a little bit smoother. So anyway, so enough rambling. I just figured that since I had the rifles out, and since I was painting them, and since I was thinking about it, that I would go ahead and shoot the video right quick. Both of these rifles are all finished up now. I'll let them, I got a fire going, so I'll let them sit out here overnight and cure. And then they'll be ready to put back into, you know, put the slings back on, strip the tape off and everything. And they'll be ready to put into service whenever springtime comes and them gophers come out. Or, you know, I ought to go ahead and slip in a couple of bunny hunts before, you know, now that the move is all done. Small game season ends, I think it ends at the end of this month, end of February or the end of March. So I should probably slip in a small game hunt here sooner or later. You know, just cottontails, because they've actually got a season. Pigeons, gophers, jackrabbits, fox. I think that's most of what I go after with a pellet rifle. You know, there's no season on them. But cottontails there is. And so I probably ought to go hunting with them before the season ends. And then the 22 Marauder with the Crossman barrel, I'm going to go ahead and, as soon as I get this new one, it's the 22 Marauder with the Lothar Walther barrel on it. So far, shooting it here in the shop at 40 feet, it's pretty dang impressive. I put the target inside, I think, already. But I pulled the rifle out of the box, gave the barrel a good scrubbing with a nice pull-through, I can't remember the name of it, the system, but basically weed eater string and a fitted mandrel that goes onto it that's caliber specific, and round patches and ballistol, I believe. Cleaned the barrel really good, brought it, mounted a scope, brought it out here to the shop, didn't adjust the trigger, didn't do nothing. I've got a pellet target way down there, one of the real nice bullet traps, and the first 10 round group was smaller than my pinky nail, and that was with the JSB 18.13 grain domes, which is a pellet that I really like, which this rifle started shooting really good, but then it didn't like them anymore for some reason, which I don't know if it was a different lot number or what. I can't imagine anything in the barrel changed, you know, besides being dirtied or fouled and whatnot. Even scrubbed the barrel down with it really good, and then went back and tried them again, and still, I mean, at 40 feet, it's shooting groups like that with them 18 grainers. With the H&Ns, it's, you know, that ring fingernail size groups, 10 shot groups at this distance. So I'm really thinking about putting a new barrel on it while I've got it stripped down. From what I've heard, this 22 Marauder was kind of at the tail end of when Crossman was having some problems with the quality control in their 22 barrels. If you get on the internet forums, I mean, it's all over the place. So I may end up going ahead and, when I find out where the leak is, when I strip this down, see if it needs any other parts for an overhaul, calling up Crossman, and when I order up new seals or whatever else that, you know, it looks like it needs inside, I might order up either one of their Lothar barrels or one of the new Crossman barrels, and test it out and see if it works pretty good. The H&N 14.6 grain pellets, they do just fine. In fact, I killed I don't know how many cottontails, a couple of jackrabbits, I think 2 of those fox, and some ducks. That buddy of mine, Scott, he was raising some ducks for a while. And this is another use for these pellet rifles. I think we're kind of long on time, but so that buddy, I mean, he and I do an awful lot of trading, livestock, knives, whatever. He's the guy that we traded a couple of Labrador puppies for half a steer, one puppy for a half a steer, and then another puppy for another half a steer. I get pigs and lambs and all kind of stuff from him. Well, he was raising ducks a couple of years ago, and my father-in-law, when I told him about it, he said, "Oh man, I'd like a couple of them." So I said, "Well, okay." So I called up Scott and said, "Hey, I need a couple of them ducks." He said, "Yeah, sure, come on out and pick them up." Well, so I go out there and he says, "Okay, well, let's, you go around this way and I'll go around this way and, catch a couple of them." And I said, "Catch a couple of them?" You guys got to remember, I am not a rancher, or I don't deal with a whole lot of livestock. I mean, so that just didn't sound like a very good time to me, especially since I knew I was going out to Scott's place. So I threw, a couple of pellet rifles in the truck with me, pop a couple of gophers or whatnot while I was out there. I said, "Well, why don't you just point out the ones that you want, and I'll shoot them with a pellet gun." These are shrouded pellet guns, I mean, the pellet impact is louder than the gun going off. And, there's way less stress on the animal, because 1 second it's, eating or walking or doing whatever, and the next second it's not. I mean, it's about as clean of a death as you can ever ask for. I mean, when my time comes, I'm pretty sure, man, if I could have it that clean, I would want it that clean. And so he says, "Well, heck, that's not a bad plan." So, now this being a domestic animal, not a game animal, we just pulled up, parked right outside their pen. Well, he actually has them free ranged, but, and he said, "Okay, well, see that one, that's in that group and it's starting to come over to this group?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "The one with the slightly purple head," or whatever it was, right? And I said, "Yep." He said, "Okay, go ahead and get that one." So I rested the rifle on the hood of his pickup truck, and as soon as that duck started moving out, as soon as it cleared that group and, had a good background and everything, didn't have any other ducks around him, as soon as he walked out and then paused, pellet right to the side of the head, he dropped, did his death dance, everything was over and done with. The other ducks looked up at him like, "Well, what's he doing?" And then went back to eating. So there was no getting anything riled up. There was no chasing anything, I mean, everything was just as clean, as simple as could be. That's the kind of stuff you can get done with these air rifles. They are an amazing tool, not only for pest control, but also for, harvesting your ducks or chickens, or I think I've done, with the pellet guns, I've done a couple of chickens for them, several ducks. We even tried it out on a couple of lambs. It works okay there too, but their brains are in a little bit different spot inside their skull, so that you got to look at your anatomy charts before you do those. But anyway, so I guess that's enough rambling. I'm going to go ahead and let these cure up and then strip the tape off of them tomorrow and put them back in service. And then strip this one down, get a new barrel for it, and find out where the leak's coming from, and then get it back in service. I think that paint job on that one it'll stay just fine, unless I got to strip it down to rebuild it, which I kind of doubt. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video. Post in the comments below, do you think camoing an air rifle or a regular hunting rifle, do you think it makes a difference with not only game animals, you know, staying concealed with game animals, and then also with public relations. See if, I mean, you know, if you guys have got any stories on something like that. With regular rifles, the only story I have with that is my daughter's first rifle was a Ruger 1022 in stainless. Had a gorgeous gray laminate Mannlicher stock on it. And of course that stock was too big for her at how big she was at that time. So we ended up grabbing one of the beech stocks, a wood stock. I cut it down and reshaped it and everything. And of course the finish looked nasty, so I asked her, you know, what color she wanted to paint it. And she said, pink. Was it pink with purple polka dots or purple with pink polka dots? I can't remember. I know the stock is in the house somewhere. But that's what we did. I mean, we painted that stock pink and purple. And everywhere she went, now this is before the craze of, you know, pink rifles, you know, really was a thing. I mean, I'd heard of them, but I'd never seen one. And everywhere she went, everybody was, oh, that's a cute little rifle, you know. I mean, people they almost didn't even think of it as a rifle anymore because it wasn't black or traditional colors for a rifle, which is kind of what I was getting at here. Anyway, again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed looking at some cool old pellet guns, and we will see you next time.